Thanks as always for joining us for this episode of Fluff and Crunch. Today, Chris and I discuss two fiction properties, both from book series, that we think would be great as mines for ideas for characters, for stories, and even for settings if you wanted to homebrew something. Beyond that, we also talk about maybe which systems you could use to easily put these things to use at your table. As always, like and subscribe, whether this is the podcast or the YouTube. And if you're interested in getting into the conversation, join our Discord or leave a comment on this video. Thanks so much and have a great day. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm well. In that period of the year where lots of things are winding down, but I've got a couple of moments of I don't know, for lack of a better term, excitement coming up work-wise in the next week or so. So before Christmas and then things will really get quiet for like about a week and a half, 2 weeks.
But my excitement for this term now.
All right. Well, good stuff. So maybe you and I can provide some excitement for each other and the people listening and watching. How's that for a segue?
Very good. Of course, by the time this comes out, it'll be like the second week of January. So
it will. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But you'll know about our general level of excitement or lack thereof in the weeks before Christmas.
We're still building up to Christmas at this point. But
that's right. That's right.
When it's released, it will not be.
It will not be. It'll be over. But we'll be in 2024. It's our second episode of the calendar year, and we did this once, and I think this is like a category, whatever we can refine over time, but periodically bringing to people's attention fiction properties that do not exist in games, but we think could be viable for settings and for stories. And whether you wanted to run something long-term or you wanted to do something short-term, either or, we think that these would be valid. So last time we talked about the Netflix series Kipo, and I talked about the wackadoo trilogy of books called Janissaries by Jerry Pournelle. I'll put the link to that old episode in the notes. And also, I'm going to have to get in the habit of saying this, and you are, or both of us are, you're supposed to like and subscribe.
Yeah,
right?
Much liking and subscribing, please.
Much liking and subscribing, podcast or YouTube. So this week we're going to do the same thing, refine the category a little bit, but talk about two other fiction properties. And I'm going to let you go first, or do you want me to go first? Because you already know what I'm going to bring up, but you don't know anything about it. And I have no idea what you're going to bring up, and I know nothing about it. I'm certain I don't.
Yeah, you can go first.
Don't sound too excited now.
I was thinking, am I still sharing my screen? In which case, everyone can see it, or am I not? Did I not do it?
You are not. I see
then.
You with your 2D20 crunchometer in the background.
Yeah, you can go first.
All right. Well, last time I drew from a book series, and I don't want to sound one note, but I read a lot. And I alternate between like analytical history and schlock fiction. Like those are my two broad genres of reading. Anyway, a number of years ago, actually around the time, I like that. A number of years ago, and it was around the time that the book came out, just by chance, I read a book by a guy named Eric Flint, Eric with a C. Eric Flint. The book's called 1632. Okay. And much like last time with Janissaries, there is a premise that is absolutely wackadoo that you just have to say, okay, I'm gonna run with it. That's cool. Think about it. Like if you dig Shadowrun, there's a couple of premises you just have to accept and get beyond them and not argue them. And then you're cool with it. So 1632 takes place in the year 1632 during the 30 Years' War in Germany. But for some unknown reasons, and these are reasons that in the books that I've read in this series, it's never determined or expressed, the town of Grantville, West Virginia, which is a fictional town, Grantville, West Virginia, about I think it's about 6 miles in diameter, is for some unknown reason transported through time and space from West Virginia to Germany in 1632. And with it goes part of a coal mine, and with it goes a small town, and with it goes vehicles and all this stuff. and the citizens of Grantville must figure out what to do and how to survive during the 30 Years' War. And they interact with all kinds of historical figures, and they thus change history. They interact with Gustav Adolf II, also known as Gustavus Adolphus, who was the king of Sweden, who came down and fought in the 30 Years' War in that second phase of it. They interact with Tilly. They interact with the Roman Catholic Church out of France, and it, like I said, it's the premise is nutty. However, once you accept that, there's an interesting combination where you'd think, well, gee whiz, the people from West Virginia, lots of like guns and hunters and trucks and stuff like that, they're going to roll over these folks. Yeah, for a short period of time. They only have just so much ammunition. They only have just so much fuel. They only have just so much stored up food, meaning they're going to need to start cultivating food and quickly because of when during the calendar year and the seasons the town of Grantville just appears. And so it goes well beyond, and the series is followed up with 1632, 1634, and there is if you look up the 1632 series, and I'll put a link to it, you can go to Eric Flint's website as well. There is a main line of stories that he tells, and then there are a series of branches of other stories involving other characters and other plot lines and other themes and things like that. There's a significant amount of character development. There's a significant amount of like military activity. There's also a lot of thoughtful resource management. It doesn't get so crunchy. It's not like the astronaut level, or the Martian rather. Sorry, it's not like the Martian level, resource management. But it gets into those questions. There's a lot of politics and political intrigue and diplomacy, and I think Flint does a nice job of taking some real things and real people and places and themes in history and saying, what would happen if I poured this on it, And so I think that if you wanted to have like a genre bending or genre combining story or run a longer campaign, I think this would be pretty cool. I think you could take Achtung Cthulhu, use it with very little modification. I don't think you'd need cohorts. You take Achtung, you strip out the magic. Achtung provides all the weapons you need. If you wanted to be a little crunchier, a little more grim, maybe add a little more desperate to it, then I would go with Twilight 2000 because of all the resource management and because of the fact that all the different horses and weapons and fortifications and those kinds of things and ways to figure that out, that's all provided for in Twilight 2000 readily. So that's what I'll throw at you. Any thoughts, reactions, questions?
This is a war I'd never heard of, so I'm
What? You never heard of the 30 Years' War?
No, I imagine most people have never heard of the 30 Years' War.
It was the most destructive war in European history before World War I, in terms of lives lost and people displaced.
Germany random war that happened in 1648.
Yeah, it ran from 1618 to 1648. It was made up of like 3 or 4 primary phases. Germany really took it pretty hard, and it had religious, cultural, national, pre-nationalistic dimensions to it. And some of the earliest, like what historians look on as like theories of combined arms operations are rooted in that war. That probably doesn't mean anything to you, but there it is.
No, yeah, I remember that. I know, just looking at the map of Europe from around that time period, it's funny when you see things that are completely different. So like Norway doesn't exist at that point. There's a kingdom of Denmark, which is Denmark plus what we would now call Norway.
Mm-hmm.
The kingdom of Sweden is basically Sweden plus Finland plus those little bits that are just down from Finland. I can't think what. And then there's a place called the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which is massive.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Yep. And there's no Germany. I mean, Germany is Germany's well over 200 years away in terms of being a single unified state. You have Germans, and you have German culture, and you have all these different principalities and whatnot that make up that which is mostly Germany today. But there's no single German state. Yeah, the 30 Years' War is one of those things that gets forgotten, looked over, ignored. But it's interesting. It's really interesting. and did a lot to shape uh, well, did a lot to shape Europe during that time period. And what's nice about, going back to the books, Flint does again a nice job. He knows his history well enough to play with it well,
Right.
without making it a history novel. That's not what it is. It's yes, it's an alternate history, but he doesn't dwell on the history. He dwells more on his bizarre story.
I feel like you'd have to know the period reasonably well to be able to playing this.
I think if
And
you
so,
were to
like you said,
go ahead.
no, you go, and then I'll
I was gonna say,
conclude the
if you
point I
read the
wanted to.
book, if you read the first book, which is like 20 years old and you can get for dirt cheap on paperback, if you read the first book and then you went to Wikipedia and read about the 30 Years' War and read about the French Catholic Church, and you read about Gustav Adolf II from Sweden, you read about some of the major German leaders, and you got a map, you'd be good to go. I mean, if you just look up, pictures of the German countryside, you'd have a sense of it, and
Yeah,
even, like I
I
said,
was
even using Twilight 2000, like kind of, if you wanted to make it a little more dreary, that vibe would fit just fine.
I was thinking more just trying to get the technology level right and stuff, because it's in that kind of period where like guns are being invented,
Mm-hmm.
but technology is progressing. I mean, it's about it's around about the Renaissance or just after.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, what exactly is the level of technology? Because for like the next 200 years, not huge amount really changes. So you'd probably be all right, actually, if
Well, it's like the
there's
weapons,
muskets
the,
and that
the
stuff there.
firearms that were carried were heavy, slow to reload, really inaccurate. If they hit you, you were screwed, because it was like being shot with a golf ball, practically. Um, I exaggerate, but not by too much. They There were still formations that used pikes, so it is an interesting hodgepodge. It's one of the last. It might actually be the last major like European war where the typical soldier wasn't armed with a firearm.
Right.
There was a mix of things. So yeah,
No,
I
it's
throw that out there. I don't know if I would run that long term, but I think it'd be a fascinating, call it like a short campaign, maybe like 4, 5, 6 sessions, something like that.
yeah.
Maybe have like two or so story arcs that feed off one another. Enough time for the players to show up and feel like they can kick ass because you know, one of them has an AR-15 or something like that, the characters, but then start to recognize, oh crap, I really need to fire single shot because this burst is really just this weapon's becoming a bullet hose and I'm running out of ammunition, and that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, that's why you do need to use a game that actually then tracks individual
Yes.
ammo, because a lot of 2D20 games track like sort of this sort of nebulous ammo stat, which
Mm,
essentially, unless you choose to fire burst, you never actually use any ammo.
that's a good point. Actually, yeah, that's a really good point. Octung would require that you come up with some kind of an ammo counting house rule, which is, I mean, that's easy. You want to.
I can't think what Fallout did now, because I think Fallout must have actually tracked individual bullets.
I don't remember.
Well, because I think it had to have, because it had the whole survival thing. So if you don't have individual bullets,
Mm.
then it's not a proper survival game, really. But honestly cannot remember if it
But
was
let's
doing that.
face it, it would be really easy. It would be really easy, even if you don't know a darn thing about firearms. It'd be really easy to look up online and be like, okay, how much does your typical, shotgun, how many shells does it
Yeah.
hold? How many shells does your typical like lever action rifle? That stuff's not hard to figure out. And then you're just asking people to count. That's it. That's easy. It's funny. Like the idea of, we need a system for that. It's like, no, we just need to mirror reality.
Yeah,
That's
you
pretty
just
easy.
write it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's certainly very interesting.
yeah. Yeah. Like I
Okay.
said, the book is entertaining. The book does a nice enough job of the resource management to not make it tedious and not turn it into like a fantasy technical exercise, but it incorporates enough of it to put downward pressure on the characters so that they can't just act without thinking when it comes to their high-tech resources. And I find that fascinating. I find those kinds of limitations placed on players challenges them and makes them, I think you get better stories out of it.
Cool.
So if nothing else, read the book.
That's another interesting book.
What?
No, that's another
Oh,
interesting book.
so what are you bringing to the table? What is, because I saw you had a list. I've read the list. I've never heard of anything on it.
I
Or are you
added
going to
some stuff
spin
to the
this thing
list.
behind
I
you?
am going to spin. Well, that's just, again, that's just a flat image of the thing, which I am going to have to spin, which is I'm going to have to share my screen to do that. So,
Do it. So if you're all
uh,
listening, he's sharing a screen. He's going to spin his wheel of death and determine what he is
there we go.
going to do.
So can you see the spinny thing then? Yeah, so I
Mm-hmm.
have my list. I added some things to it. I took one off. I had a gate thing called Carnival Row on here, and then remembered they'd actually made like a short, really short thing of it.
Okay,
Um,
that I've heard of, and I've heard of Mortal Kombat. The rest
yes,
of
you.
those, Overwatch, I've heard of, but I know nothing
Let's
about.
spin. Oh, the wheel is spinning.
Oh, I'm getting
Exciting.
dazzled here.
That's a good one to go with. Code. I actually still don't know whether it's pronounced Codex Alera or Codex Alera.
What do
I'm
you
gonna.
like?
So, Codex Alera is I think there was 6 books, a high fantasy ish series by a guy called Jim Butcher. So Jim Butcher is the guy who wrote the Dresden Files, which I assume you probably have heard of the Dresden Files.
I have not read. I have heard of. I am
Oh,
somewhat
you should.
familiar with.
Anyway, so he was at a convention and he was basically saying, I'm thinking of doing a new series. And I don't know what made him think this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. But allegedly, he was at a convention where he basically dared someone to give him 2 things, and that's how he would come up with his next property. And the 2 things he got given was Pokemon and some either like the Missing Legion or the Forgotten Legion, which is some kind of Roman legion that just vanished. They'd gone on a like a walk or a
Right.
quest, or not a quest. You know what I mean? They didn't go on a quest, they were an art, but they went off to do something and they were never heard from again.
Right. I went to pick up their dry cleaning and never came
Yeah,
back.
I can't remember what the phrase is, but essentially that's it. So and then Pokemon, which just sounds really silly. Now,
Yes, it
when I
does.
started reading this, I just started reading this because it was another series by the guy who wrote Dresden Files,
Right.
and we really enjoy the Dresden Files books. And so it starts off where there's this kid who he lives in this world, and most people have these they're like almost like companions. So you either have like it's basically the elements, so like water, air, but we've got earth, fire, wood, metal. So some of them, like your 4 standard elements, but they've also thrown in wood and metal.
Okay.
And you have some control over these things, and you'll also have a spirit that can come and help you. So if you can control wood a bit, you'll also have a wood spirit that helps you.
So the
And they're
spirit
like,
is somehow associated with
yeah,
the
and they're
the
like
the
a
nature of
little
the
animal,
thing. Okay.
like it'll be a little animal or some kind of spirit thing. So that's the Pokemon idea. When I read this, I had no idea it was a Pokemon reference, but essentially that's what it is.
Right.
But at the same time, a lot of the stuff to do with the military of this world is basically based on Roman legions, and that's the clothes they wear. It's Roman legions. There's like an emperor. All the characters have Roman sounding names.
It's not Earth. It's just
It's
somewhere that
not Earth. It's
happens
this
to
other. I
be.
think it's called. Well, the first book is called The Furies of Calderon. So I think I assume Calderon, because I haven't read this for years.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so it starts off with this kid he doesn't have a companion, and he doesn't have any magic stuff at all. And essentially, he gets into it, like over the series of the books, he finds out that he's more important than everyone thought, and then he starts gaining the ability to control multiple elements, I think, which other people can't do. And then I think he ends up being, he'll be like the emperor's son, or something like that, something
He's got a
really important.
chosen one aspect to him.
And at the same time, there's like another nation, or it might be like a monstrous nation, I feel like, because again, quite a while since I read this, that are attacking them. And so then to start off with, it's just about this kid discovering his powers. And then it comes into like people trying to come and like get him and attack him. So it gets onto this big war thing. And then there's essentially there's a first trilogy and there's another trilogy. So in the
Okay.
second, like the first couple of trilogies, kind of just setting things up, and then there's a little bit of a time jump, and then he's in the army and he's really important, and then there's all kinds of other stuff going on. But it's quite a fascinating. I mean, so that's my elevator pitch thing of it. But I mean, the first one is just really good, that it's Pokemon meets the Forgotten Legion, which is just silly. But he actually turned this into a 6-book series. which I never actually finished. I think it was on about book 5, and then something came up, and I never. It's one of those things, when you don't read a book for so long, you realize that you can't pick up where you left off. You'd
Yeah,
have
you'll
to
feel
go
like you
back
need
to
to
the
go back and
start.
reread one or something.
Yeah, so I'd have to go back right to the start and read the whole lot. Um, but yeah, in terms of why I thought it'd make a good series role playing game. I mean, it's just set up for it. There's clearly, it's a different world. There's areas of the world that are not well mapped. There are areas of the world which are dangerous. There are really big cities with lots of intrigue and like infighting going on. And then there's more countryside places where people get attacked by things. There's like essentially monster type things because people don't control them. There's a form of magic, but the magic is much more. I mean, it'd be closer to Avatar, where there's essentially your benders. So they call them crafters, but essentially they're water benders and earth benders and so on. So it's very similar to that.
So whichever of the 6 element things
Yeah.
so let me make sure I understand. So everyone has some kind of element that's associated with them.
Yeah. But the extent to which people could like, so some people can like, maybe they can light a fire.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe they're good at chopping trees. Or some people it's
Okay.
really basic. They're
So
a
the
good
degree to
fisherman.
which the
Yeah.
power is okay.
So some people are like much, much more powerful. So it does massively change by how powerful people are. And then people have other skills and so on. So like if you're good at metal, that's what that tends to make people like good swordsmen and stuff like
Right.
that. But yeah, I think it would just make a good campaign setting because you have got magic, but it's different magic. Like I say again, it's more like Avatar magic. And even in that, not everyone has it. But in this, so everyone has some degree of stuff they can do.
Okay.
There's stuff going on. There's a meta plot because essentially there's people trying to move and position things, and then it kicks off into a war. There's all these creatures and things.
Does the magic come at a cost?
Uh,
Like how hard is
I
it
know.
for
I think
whether it's like, yeah, I can snap my fingers and I can light a candle or I can breathe fire on you. Is there some kind of cost associated with it or challenge
I don't think so much.
associated
I
with
think
it?
it's more a case of like the training. So I think it's in the books. I think it's more presented as some people are just like more powerful and better, and then you have to train. But to get really like, so some people just don't bother. Like if you're living out in the boonies and you're a woodsman, you haven't got the time to go and spend like going to a big university and train how to be really good at this. You
Okay.
just have to get on at doing your job, which is cutting trees, because that's how you earn a living. You can't, so it's that kind of thing. So the
Right.
really people who are showing a bit more skill, they might have to go off and learn how to get good at it. So it's kind
And
of like that kind of thing, like you'd see in, some wizard things where you go off and you go to wizard school and you learn to be a really powerful wizard kind of thing. So it's more like that thing. You need the training. And
the
then
reason I asked is like I was just thinking like mechanically, obviously magic can look a lot of different ways
yeah,
mechanically, and like Octum Cthulhu or Conan as compared to like 5e is a radically different take on how magic fits into the story. So I was just thinking like what uh what existing system might be appropriate for the vibe that the book already tries to promote or portray.
I mean, yeah, I think it'd have to be. You'd probably actually be better off using it as like skill rolls, whereas as opposed to like using a resource, different levels of what you're trying to do could be just a difficulty you have to achieve, and therefore the
Mhm.
higher skilled you are, the more likely you are to get a nice big roll, which will give you stuff trying to do, as opposed to that this spell has a like a harm cost to you. I don't remember there being much more like that.
So like people
Um,
don't get like a nosebleed or a headache.
No,
They just
not
might
from
not
again, what
cast
from
it.
I can remember. It's a while since I've read
Okay.
them, but I mean, again, a lot of people don't even have any real level. It was really basic stuff, like a slight gust of wind kind of thing. It's only a handful of people that are like crazily
Okay.
powerful. But then most people do have these little. I mean, they are Pokemon. That's where they came from. They have these like little creatures that follow around. And a lot of these is just like an animal that you have linked with at very young age, and then you can kind of think what they do and not think. You can perceive through them and that kind of stuff. So again, that gives you another aspect that you can look at.
Okay.
What I can't remember is if they die, whether you get another one or not. I feel like they bonded really early on, and you stay bonded to that creature until they die, but they live longer than they would normally.
Like a parrot.
Yeah.
Turtle.
But yeah, it's just there's quite a few good ideas in there, and there'd be enough to run a decent sized campaign on. I mean, I'm kind of surprised considering they did do a Dresden Files book that, like, the guys at is it Evil Hat? The
Yeah.
guys do Fate. I'm kind of surprised they didn't say because actually, like, Jim Butcher's really good friends with them. Like he
Really?
lived, part of the reason they did it, he's genuinely like, he's, you know, they, and they play role playing games together.
Okay.
So it was a no brainer for them to say, oh, Jim, can we do like the Dresden Files role playing game? Oh, yeah, cool. Because they already knew him. So I'm kind of surprised they've never gone, actually, can't we do that other thing you did? Can we turn that, why don't we turn that into a way?
I
It would
have I,
work fine in Fate. It'd be very easy to do in
I have
Fate.
no idea if that's even in print. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, I
Let's
mean,
see.
so one of the things they published, some of the, I think like Blades in the Dark ended up being published by Evil Hat, which is why then they're still doing okay. I mean, they're still going along though. They're still releasing stuff for Fate. Fate has just become a much more niche game than it was. You know, there was a point where Fate was quite big. If you went onto RPG.net sort of 10 years ago, every time you said, what system should I run X, Y, or Z
Right.
in,
It
the
got
answer was
talked about a
Fate.
lot.
It was always, and that's kind of just slowly drifted away. You know, they released their new edition of Fate, which was good, and the books are really good. They're very well written books, kind of books
Mhm.
where even if you weren't going to play Fate, they're good for just, you know, advice for about thinking about things. But since then, that's kind of it. They're still releasing stuff, but it's, you know, people don't talk about Fate so much anymore. But yeah, that's why I think I think it's a good setting. The books are quite good fun, and although I haven't finished reading them all, and you could definitely use it as a role playing thing. It's ripe
Sounds
for
like it.
using it as a role playing
And actually,
setting.
it's fascinating the idea of okay, everyone has some kind of spell-like ability for for just descriptive purposes. Everyone's got that, and then also now, does everyone have a little like weirdo companion?
I think there was everyone initially does, apart from this one main character who for
Okay,
some reason kind of doesn't because he's different, and then over the time
right.
he becomes
Okay,
stupidly
but
powerful.
that's cool though because that, I mean that as a hey, we talk about system setting and story, and that's an interesting that's an interesting setting feature
Yeah.
that you could see both of those things, that spell like ability and the little companionoid. It's a cool aspect of the setting. It would be an interesting thing to incorporate those into stories. Everyone's got something that's kind of like a familiar animal companion of some sort and a spell like ability. And then mechanically, it'd be interesting to think about how do you wrap those things in? Like how do you handle do those little companion things, do they act independently? Can like the companion thing like in combat like trip someone or pickpocket someone? Obviously I know nothing about it because I haven't read the books, but that'd be an interesting challenge to think about. Okay, what existing system out there would maybe enable me to express those things mechanically so that it actually ends up feeling like what it's presented like in the books. I actually saw that question a couple days ago on X, formerly Twitter. Um, the artist formerly known as Twitter. Someone was asking like why, and they weren't it wasn't in a combative way at all. I think it came across as just a genuine like, huh, why do people say there's no such thing as a universal system? And and I responded as one would expect that I would, that if the setting and the story have certain tropes or certain things that are of it that make it unique, there needs to be some kind of mechanical support or thumb on the scale to push those things, to see that things unfold the way that the setting and the story um, demand, to make it feel a certain way. So I wonder what would be. I mean, obviously, not having read the books, I've got no idea as to how are they chaotic? Are they confused? Do they do things? Do they do only what their controller tells them to do, or do they go off script? I mean,
Yeah, I think from what I remember is that again, it's a kind of element of the. I think
you
mostly
shouldn't
they
do
would
these things
be
randomly. I think that's the bottom line.
mostly they would be allied to what you want them to do, but they also have their own minds, so they would
Yeah,
do their own things. But they'd be like a companion in a thing that you can get them to do certain things, but then other things they would do themselves.
interesting.
Um, Oh, it's funny what you're saying about generic systems. Have we ever done an episode on generic systems in general? I feel like we did, but I can't remember.
Not really. I mean, we've talked in the past. I mean, a long time ago about the idea of the mechanics and why system shouldn't sit all by its lonesome, completely untethered from the setting. And when we say the story, not only the story that you're working on telling, but the type of story you're working on telling. I actually think that we should return to that. I think that we should do an episode about why those three things should marry and support one another, at least to some degree, and why there's no such thing as a good universal game system that's not just a resolution mechanic.
Yeah, I think that's where the difference is. There are universal systems, but will it be a good universal system? And the end of the day, sometimes it's just nice to play things that are different.
Sure.
So anyway, that's all. But so there we go. There we have 2 more suggestions of different properties, both of which we hadn't heard of each other's.
Nope.
That if,
and I'll
if
put
nothing
links.
else,
Actually, while you were talking, go ahead.
I was going to say, if nothing else, just go and read them.
Yeah,
might give you inspiration for a game. And if you turn them into a full-fledged role-playing game or system, give us credit.
There you go. There you go. And as you're listening or watching, if you have other fiction properties that you've read, watched, whatever, let us know. I mean, there's so many good stories out there in print, on the television, in movies. I don't have time. I listen to precious few podcasts just because of time. But I know that there are storytelling podcasts out there. There are storytelling YouTube channels. I mean, there's other new media that I think that I have no idea about. And who knows what cool story ideas and setting ideas and whatnot are out there. So if you've got ideas, share them and join our Discord and share them there as well.
Well, there we go.
There we go.
Check them out. And then don't forget to like and subscribe. Unlike Jeremy,
exactly. I have to get used to saying that again and again and again. And we're supposed to point downward because that's where the buttons are, and ring the bell and all that stuff on YouTube, that is. Thank you, as always, for listening to Fluff and Crunch. You can join our Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, all through the links in the show notes. Thanks again. Have a great day. We look forward to talking with you.